Which brings us to our next speaker, who knows better than most why complaints about food matter, Maggie Beer. Maggie is one of Australia's best-known culinary icons. A respected mentor to many, she is celebrated for her entrepreneurial skills and natural leadership abilities in the gourmet food arena. Maggie's fame has been built on a career that spans farming, food production, exporting, food writing and television presenting. With an impressive list of achievements adding to an extra string to her bow, in 2014, Maggie established the Maggie Beer Foundation to provide the pleasure of a good food life for all, regardless of age, health and health restrictions. The nutritional welfare of those in aged care homes has been an ongoing concern for Maggie for a long time, and she's so happy to finally have found time and people to support her passion. In fellowship with her board of industry leaders, professors and health advisors, Maggie has made it her personal mission to link the latest research of nutrition's impact on brain health and general well-being with her innate knowledge of what good food can do for anyone's state of mind, a truly nourishing mix, so much greater than the sum of its parts. Maggie's hope is to create an appetite for life, leads her work on many levels with the hope of encouraging everyone, young, old and in between, to enjoy quality seasonal cooking every day. Welcome, Maggie.
Well, it's got cold all of a sudden. I was asked to come here today to start off with just, I guess, the story, a little bit of my story, the journey, and what in the foundation I'm trying to achieve. And it's no secret that I've loved food all my life, and despite no formal training, it's provided me with the most incredible opportunities beyond what I could have dreamt. And from the early days of farming to the Pheasant Farm restaurant, food production, food writing, TV. I needn't have put all this in here. You said it all. Food is such an enjoyable part of my life, my journey, and one of my greatest passions, along with my family and music. They're my passions in life. So why the journey began was when I was made Senior Australian of the Year in 2010. And one of my 900 requests to speak that year, I didn't do them all, was to speak to 1,000 CEOs of aged care at their annual conference. And so I did a lot of research. I visited homes, mainly in Victoria, because I thought I'd keep away from my home state. And I recognised the need for change and started the foundation in 2014. That's a snapshot. I did go to Mark Butler, who was then the Minister for Ageing, and said, you know, what we have to do is find all the great exponents of aged care in Australia, because I know they're there, and celebrate them and use them as benchmarks. He said, great idea, no money. So it's 3 years next week that we've had the foundation going, and it's basically because I really do believe it's everybody's right to have good food, because good food is medicine, and it's the fuel of life. It's what fires our appetite for life, and no matter what age you have, it's so important. And you in the room that have been in aged care have every right to think I'm new to this field, only 3 years, and I admit I started the journey incredibly green, yet I learned very quickly, and I've seen great things, good things, and terrible things. But also, I've seen the small things that can bring about huge change. So the vision of the foundation was, as you said, was gathering together people, well, not only my board, but there are so many people doing great things in aged care in all sorts of areas of endeavour, and gathering them together, using the foundation as a conduit for new ideas, new thinking. but with the one main purpose to make that food experience for everyone, whether they're in homes or in the community, a positive one, so they can lead a meaningful life with the energy to be involved physically, as well as mentally. And that can't happen without pleasure from food being there in equal measures to nutrition. The pleasure has such a bearing on our well-being, something that everyone deserves, but none more so than the elderly who become unable to look after themselves. They deserve to lead a good life to the end of their life. And the good nutrition is a given, and that's so needed for the muscle mass in their bodies and for them to be able to be physical, but without the pleasure in every bite, they often don't want to eat enough that will give them the energy need to be engaged in life. We need to give them something to look forward to, that nutrition and pleasure in every bite. So this setting out to be a conduit for the latest thinking was a great idea. And it's a much bigger arena than I ever would think. But the exciting thing is the openness of organisations wanting to change and just not quite knowing how in many cases. So the foundation purpose seems very simple when I say it like this: find out the impediments and the needs and opportunities. And by drawing on the experience and the wisdom of those doing it so well, help resolve the difficulties, and the outcome really does present a rich recipe. And you might think this is a utopian ideal, but there is no need there, and nor is there any place for institutionalised food. It seems, what I've learned is that everyone in aged care works so hard, and they are in aged care because they love it. Yet to bring about change, it needs different thinking from the daily must-dos. I know it's a huge and complex arena, but already we've seen so much change, and there is nothing more seductive than seeing change happen to keep you going. So our objectives: to advocate for good food experience for older people, improve their emotional and physical well-being, and to help older people in the community to access affordable, familiar, fresh and wholesome foods. To provide new understanding, skill and knowledge, I'll talk a bit about this, to the cooks and chefs providing food for older people, to deliver enhanced food experience and from all the meals. And to advocate for specialised training. We've been doing this for 3 years, and it's now coming off finally, for the aged care sector, to make it a career of choice for cooks and chefs that they can do more than any other person to make a difference to the lives of those in their care. And to raise the community appreciation and awareness of the importance of wholesome ingredients, flavour and experience of food as those key determinants of well-being. So, complaints in aged care I was asked to talk about. And one of the most important things, I guess, for me is the residents' right to speak, but you have to empower them so they will feel comfortable to speak. As indeed, I have found you need to empower the cooks and chefs of the right to ask for better equipment, ask that will make their job easier and more productive. I've come across cooks and chefs that even haven't had the confidence to ask management when their equipment is broken down, even if it's a grater that the handle has come off. You know, so empowering is a really important message. We all know that the industry is moving towards consumer-directed care, meaning residents will have even more choice and say over services that are provided to them, but we need to give them the voice to speak, because everyone knows that there is competition in industry, and the more people are happy, the more they have, the home has an edge competitively. I might just digress for a moment to baby boomers and moving into aged care. I don't worry so much about them. Um, uh, because you know they're coming, you know they're coming, and they will have different expectations, especially with food, after growing up in Australia full of culinary options, and they have been changing the landscape. I say this to the room. I'm even older than a baby boomer, but and so they will speak out easily. However, it's upsetting that those currently in aged care are the silent generation, those who are often, I'm afraid's not the word, almost just unwilling often to complain or demand. Now, I couldn't believe that it's only 8% of your complaints are from food. I thought, anecdotally, I hear so much more. And I wondered about, I remember having a conversation with the advertiser years ago now, when they said one letter written is equivalent to 200 or 300 people who thought of writing. And I wonder if that's not there as well, that only 8% are food complaints. So, given, and I think only 7% in South Australia, I don't know whether that's a thing for South Australia doing well. I always like to say that. But all residents have rights and should be treated with dignity and respect, but it isn't always the case, we know. But aged care providers should be encouraging complaints and treating them as part of the opportunity to improve service, their service. It's called continuous improvement, of course, and when it's done, with the right feeling for it, it has the most amazing advantages, because it's not criticism, it's looking at how we do things better. And so it's drawing that information out. But that culture has got to come from leadership. If you don't have it in leadership, you won't have it. You'll think complaints are something that you don't want to listen to. Whereas when you know what's wrong, you can do something about it. So I feel very strongly about that. Common food complaints. I've been fed some from the Commission. I've heard lots, but there's no good to have complaints without ideas of how to fix them. But just really simple things. Scrambled eggs being made with powdered egg, and scrambled eggs being too watery. If there's one thing that I can taste is powdered egg is just it shouldn't be there. But scrambled eggs too watery, what we should be making scrambled eggs out of is using butter and cream, using and cooking it last moment, cooking it not for 100 or 200 people in a back kitchen that it sits in a bain-marie. Scrambled eggs can be cooked in 2 minutes, right? And so cooking them in the small little, the serveries, the smells of food being cooked are so important. That's last minute cooking in those satellite areas. It is people's homes. It is not a facility. So that smell of food is so important. In South Australia, the most common issues were adequate nutrition and hydration, quality and variety. Hydration is a vexed issue in that it has to be so much on the horizon of everyone, because it is so important. And better that you have a nutritionist talk to you about that. But quality and variety, I will continue to talk on after I go through this list of very regular complaints. The pie crust is too hard and the resident can't chew or break it down. Training, recipes, ideas, just a simple fact of a pastry made with lots of butter, and perhaps butter and sour cream or cream cheese that has so much nutrition from the cheese, from the butter is just flavour, but it melts in the mouth. And it's so quick to make. You can make it in these big machines. So it's about ideas and training and recipes. Salads only include tomato and lettuce, no other salad items. A garden. And yes, you can pick the herbs and vegetables from your garden if you have a process in place. You are audited on your manual, not on an overarching set of regulations. And but you have to want to do it. But also asking them, because I think it's quite interesting, that one, I don't see those in aged care at the moment wanting eggplant or fennel in their salads. So what do they want? Perhaps they want tomatoes that have real taste, that they've been grown by the home would be Nirvana, but at least bought from, there are people commercially who grow heritage tomatoes. And yes, I know they're more expensive and we'll get to that. But let's ask them what they want in their salads. And that's where it becomes an opportunity, because the more that we can draw from them, the familiar, but and what's going to give them pleasure. Meat that is too tough to chew. That's so easy. And that is taking a shoulder of lamb and slow cooking it over 6 to 8 hours in an oven bag. So there's not even any mess. It can happen while everything else is happening, and you can spoon it. It's so tender and melt in the mouth, and it's a lesser cost cut. The same for neck of lamb. Exactly, and it's velvety and full of flavour, and don't be afraid of salt. I know there are people that are on salt-free diets, and a nutritionist is going to kill me, but my God. Okay, I'll go on to another one. Vegetables overcooked, but then we get vegetables undercooked. Right, now overcooked, when we cook the bejesus out of them and there's no flavour left, they will also probably frozen vegetables, so don't have frozen vegetables. But also, it's all about the flow of a kitchen, not doing things that are finished at 10 o'clock in a bain-marie to 12 o'clock. It needs new thinking. It needs stepping back and saying, how can we make the most of the ingredients we have to hand? And as to undercooking, I hate squeaky beans, but I hate overcooked beans, and that will come to training. We'll get back to that. Lack of variety with vegetables, mashed potato with every meal. Cooks need inspiration. Cooks need information. And we know that those in aged care want the familiar. And that's absolutely as it should be. But sweet potato, whether it's white, red or purple, is all so full of nutrient rather than potato. And I can tell you that will be accepted. Pumpkin when it's roasted, all of those things. And whether it's made of a mash or not, and we'll get to that later too. But cooks need information, inspiration. Lack of fillings for sandwiches. I've seen some sandwiches that everyone wants white bread. Now, I guess I have to cope with that for those that are there now, because that's what they've lived by. But let's make bread the thin part and the fillings the thick part. And poached chook, old breeder chook that you poach and you cut up and you mix in a mayonnaise and make the filling thicker than the bread. It's just generosity. And that will come to budgets, and we'll come to that. You can be sure. The soup is very watery and tasteless. Of course it is, if it's not made with stock that you've made yourself and not made with vegetables. Or tasteless, watery and tasteless. Okay, so the use of boosters should be outlawed as far as I'm concerned. But the kitchen needs that time and that stepping back, and how can we make the stocks, because that's going to be cheaper for you, but you have to have the right piece of equipment to make it. You have to have the cook or the chef that understands how simple it is and wants to do it. And then, if it's thin and tasteless, the adding of pulses, that if you offer chickpeas and lentils, you might not get an absolute, yes, I'll have that for dinner, thank you, but put your chickpeas and lentils within your soups of your stock and your vegetable, and there's your nutrient, and there's your flavour, and there's the filling. It's ideas, recipes, training. Excessive use of party pies and sausage rolls. No excuse. Absolutely no excuse. Except for that some of them really love it, but do it as a treat, not as a norm. Meals being served cold. Now, this is tricky because I find the elderly elders are of a generation that they only wanted hot meals. And this is going to sound sexist, but men seem to be worse about it than women. Because the number of times I've heard that. But yet the best flavour of food is not really hot meals, but you're not going to change that entirely. So just doing the best you can and making one part of the meal really hot and the others not. But that's an idea that needs extension. Poor variety of fruit being offered, apples and bananas only. Linking with local suppliers, local orchard. We have, 6 years ago, we bought our neighbour's orchard of 2,000 trees, and I had this idealistic notion that I could sell fruit ripe from the tree to restaurants, to wherever else. No one wants to buy fruit that's ripe because it has such a short life. But I can tell you, the orchardists, say in South Australia, you've got the hills, and buying ripe fruit in season. As a grower, we might be lucky to get $2 a kilo for stone fruit, right? It's having those links, and that's an important thing, but it takes more trouble, so you have to believe that it's worth it. Lack of variety in the menu, that's about inspiration. I meet so many cooks and chefs, and they're working so hard within such extreme budgets that they need help. And they want it. Meals being too small is one complaint. Meals being too large is the other. And too small, where I'm given examples of one frankfurter and mashed potato for dinner, or half a party pie with salad, they're unacceptable and need working on, to say the least. But meals too large, full of food that is non-appetising, is both off-putting and leads to huge waste, to huge costs going down the drain. So some solutions: extra training and education by service for chefs and cooks. I've just done a roadshow in New South Wales a month ago to three places in New South Wales, in northern New South Wales, and each day I do a workshop for 30 cooks and chefs, the next day CEOs. That was interesting. Any CEOs in the room? Okay, and it was really, really good, because I learned so much from, I'm just thinking of Armidale, for instance, and I learned so much from the cooks and chefs, which is why I brought in this issue of empowering the cooks and chefs to be able to ask when they needed something, because they didn't feel they could. So I am able to tell the CEOs, this is what's happening. But this, what I found is every single one of these cooks and chefs, and over 5 days, 90 cooks and chefs. So that's across a 100-kilometre zone in northern New South Wales. Every one of them was there because they loved cooking for their oldies, right? But the example of one, for instance, who had been the cleaner, then became the kitchen hand, and then became the cook. She had never been trained. And that wasn't a particularly rare occurrence. And without training, just as I cooked, and in these one-day workshop masterclasses, I cooked with them, I cooked them against each other, we talked through the things that make the big difference. And I could see that at least 2/3 of them had so little skill, but they're hungry for learning. They're hungry for training. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been there. And I can't think that that's not representative of a lot of Australia. So we need to provide opportunity for them to learn more. And they love engaging with the residents. That's what keeps them going. It's that key. And so when they're in really big organisations where they're cooking, they're in their kitchen, they only see the quality service manager or whatever that label is, they never get to the actual residents, it takes their joy away. And there have to be ways, we talked in the workshops how there were ways to have, even in those bigger places, to have them have an opportunity to interact, and it could be scrambling the eggs in front of everyone for that à la minute, as you say in restaurants, for that just last minute food, to have those smells of the food and cooking. And in fact, we talked a lot about the sense of smell that is so important, and if there is one thing that you can do, just ideas that came from the groups, like a nurse that used to fry the onions before dinner in the dementia wards, because that was the signal that it was a meal time. We've been advocating for a long time things like bread makers in the dining room for that smell of fresh bread. Where all memories are evocative, and we can get those food memories. So, that ability to engage with residents at a higher level, the need to have open dialogue with dietitians. How many dietitians in the room? Okay. Not every dietitian has, you need a dietitian with science and with a passion for food. Those two things have to go together, or you've got the wrong dietitian. And you need to gain resident feedback, and you can put that in notes. I've said that before in a room full of dietitians, by the way. I'm not being, but I just did wonder. The need to gain resident feedback on meals often without it being a big thing. And that's where the cooks love to get that feedback, even if there are many that are grumpier than others, and good on them, and they will say that's terrible to the cook, and she'll ask why. And I'm saying she because it's probably a great, I shouldn't say, they will ask why. And they actually want to know so they can do better. Don't underestimate that. Give the residents what they want. Think about not only food, but the entire dining experience. Some other successful responses have been, a dietitian is asked to review a menu and provide a report. The right dietitian, that's fantastic. The quality manager undertakes an audit of food complaints and residents' views about food. Yes, talked about that, but it's the openness and it not being critical, but being an opportunity to improve and learn. Kitchen staff and chef meet regularly with residents. I just had a list of this and I had got off track. Easily to locate complaint forms for residents. So they can, a lot of residents don't want to upset the apple cart, we find. And but if they're easy to locate and it can be anonymous. Standing agenda at resident meetings about food issues, which are then conveyed to quality manager and kitchen staff and chef. That's the formal way of putting all this. But look, I want to come to a conclusion. I want to emphasise how important complaints are. I've said it several times, but they are your tool for improvement of overall well-being, and that's the main aim of the resident. So how do we alleviate complaints that relate not only to food but to living within homes? Because food is the centre of our plate, but it's only the beginning. Well-being, so emphatically, you can't have well-being without the pleasure of beautiful food, I've said many times, of the right nutrition to give the energy, the muscle mass to allow physicality, to allow involvement in life rather than passive acceptance I see so much of. That's not living. What homes should be is a place where an elder who is struggling in the community comes into a home to come alive and live meaningfully to the end of their lives. That doesn't always happen, and that, to me, would be the goal. How would we feel if we didn't have anything we wanted to get out of bed for? That loss of freedom, the lack of choice, no matter the conversation around consumer-directed care. And you might think me naive that I think we can change so many things in the world, but I do. We can change so many things in the world with access to good food. Food is the centre, but as I said, it's only the beginning. It's about the ambience, the outlook as you eat, the people you eat with, the conversations we need to be having, or the music to listen to. It's about connection. It's about connection and hope, together with the right food that protects our brains and makes ageing a positive part of the evolution of life. And pleasure is this big key that leads to positive energy for us, for all. Because the inverse of that is loneliness, depression, boredom, that lack of connection. And think of the loss of independence of so many of our elders, and how the system veers away from encouraging, let alone allowing them to do much for themselves, to do as much for themselves as possible, so as much independence can be maintained. There are so many good homes, and they are the ones to celebrate and emulate. But I see in many a lack of understanding not only of the quality of food, but the great benefit of good food from that health, well-being and positive energy point of view. And I'm not talking just about the residents, I'm talking about the staff, the pride of the staff. I have had letters of people that left the industry, sadly, because they were ashamed. Now, that's the worst, and we don't fix anything by dwelling on the worst. We look at the best. That positive energy, sharing positive examples and knowledge and empowering the cooks and chefs to make a difference, as long as the CEOs will release the purse strings. Now we're getting to the gritty. Okay. I've said it before, every cook and chef I meet in the aged care industry is because they love it, and let's give them what they need to be able to do it well. As I said, so often they have little training, and education is the key to so many things. And we finally got in northern New South Wales at Armidale, they have a specialised aged care training here. We started one at Nuriupa in the Barossa Valley through TAFE. TAFE just last week announced that they were doing it now. We've been 2.5 years trying to get this up, because it's a very complex area. My friend Simon Bryant, that I did 4 years of Cook and the Chef with, and he says something I'll quote: "You need to be a better cook to handle really well an aged care home than a restaurant, unless we're talking the absolute top echelon, because of the complexity of the diets, the individual needs, and so we need to train them very specifically." Health economics, to me, is the research needed to show that we spend more money on food, that there is less need to put frail residents back together on expensive supplements. With the help of SAMRI here in South Australia, are we all South Australians? Yeah, SAMRI is joining with us, and we're embarking on that, and that is really exciting. But there is a disconnect between the economics of what is required to sustain good health, let alone pleasure. And I found this from the Dietitians Association of Australia, and they said it's not possible to meet the recommended daily intake under $6 a day, yet we've come across in the masterclasses we've done with the cooks and chefs $4.50 a day as for 3 meals, and that is inhuman for me. So the unsustainable issue here is that they say, the Dietitians Association say $6 a day is possible, but that does not allow for fresh seasonal food and the right nutrition. Perhaps $9 would be in the right hands, done well. And so I say, why are we allowing such disregard for so many people? If we fix the food, we can also tackle the waste. I know from reading and from speaking that 20% of aged care homes, the residents consume less than 50% of their meals. Now that's the worst, right? But they can't possibly living in the true sense of the word, and the waste is deplorable, and it could be fixed by having better food, only having fresh vegetables rather than frozen. Now, I know the nutrient quality of frozen vegetables apparently is really just as good as fresh and can be better, but the pleasure and the smells and the flavour, because flavour has got to be important, although I'll have a frozen pea anytime. But the use of boosters and all of those things. Anyhow, we need to garner all the science and practical advice there is, the things that are seldom talked about in the community, the foods that will support the brain, the body, the implications of the gut, particularly in aged care, where the gut needs more attention than even younger people, vitamin B12, zinc, omega-3s, calcium and more, and to tackle the hysteria in the public domain about fat, dairy and the need to use diet cordials, and to share the fact that the pendulum is swinging back to full fat, thank heavens. I've been saying it for 35 years. The right fats, good fats, and not using diet cordials. But that doesn't get through to everyone. And I don't just mean the staff, I mean the families that say, well, mum was always on diet cordial and she had such a problem now that you're giving her other things that are natural. Wow. But, it is information, it's communication. Both organisations, so it comes from organisations and families. That's a complaint that I hear, that they question why I'm saying use butter rather than margarine, why I'm saying no low fat, no diet cordials. So that's a communication to fix that up. Because not everyone is aware of the change, because you have to know about it, think about it, read about it. But I don't think there is anyone here today that would want anything less than good, honest food cooked with care and with interest, with a love of food to give nutrition and pleasure. And I have to say, you might think I'm idealistic, but I'm very aware it isn't easy, but it can happen. It's incredibly complex. And it's a journey we are on, and I hope to see everyone be on it, because if you can stop the complaints about food because you have beautiful food, then all the things that surround it come into it, and then you have so much more chance of having truly happy people, and we don't have to have a commission for complaints. One day, sorry. So, look, that's probably all I have to say, but I'm free for questions so long as I can have a good drink of water. Thank you.